Alright, today we're going to be replacing this pressure switch. If you don't know how to replace a pressure switch, then this video is for you. Alright, step one, look at your pressure switch and you will see that you've got this pump wire coming in, and then it kind of gets split into this white wire, and they got one going here, one going there, and then they should have one going to the ground. And then you've got your main power coming in to the pressure switch, and you've got one coming to this post and one coming to that post there. All right, so just to reiterate, you've got power coming into the pressure switch on this outside terminals, and then once these contacts connect, that should send power on the inside. So coming from the outside to the inside goes to the pump, and that's what turns your pump on. So whenever the pressure of the system drops below a certain threshold, that's when these contacts connect, and that tells the pump to turn on and engage, and it starts to build pressure back up, or maintain it at least. And then once it hits a certain PSI, it disconnects, and those contacts are no longer touching, so that's what stops the power from going to the switch. All right, so luckily here we've got a switch, so when it's on, the pump turns on. When it's off, the pump turns off. So step one, make sure that your power is off. It's always good to confirm that. Otherwise, if you got hot contacts, it's gonna really suck when you touch it. So make sure the homeowner knows where you're gonna be working, so when they smell something burning, they know where to check. Alrighty, so we got everything figured out, verified our power's turned off. Replacing this pressure switch is gonna go as follows. I'm gonna remove these contacts, I'm going to remove this little lock nut, spin that off, pull this out, do the same thing on this other side, undo that, spin that off, pull that out, and then we're going to, got to do that first, because then you got to remove this little tube that feeds that pressure switch, so it knows whenever the pressure is at a certain range. So then you're going to take that off, and then you grab your new pressure switch out the box and just do those steps in reverse. Put your little tube back on, power up to your pump, and then put your main power back in. All right, so got these wires disconnected. And then I gotta pull the screws out and get those post terminals out there. All right, getting these off can be a pain in the butt, but I like to take a good flathead, kind of wedge it up in there, and then just beat against the flathead and get that loosened up. See, only took a couple taps. And you just unscrew that, and you pull this out. All right, halfway done. All right, so now we got our pump wires out, got that ground wire out. Gonna do the same thing. Put your screwdriver down, give it a little pit pat pop. Sometimes it can be hard. All right, finally broke it loose, and the way I did that, see if I can balance this camera just right. I had to get my screwdriver, put it on there, and then just, well, now it's all easy, but come back with the little pliers and give it a little tip tap. Anyway, got it all loosey-goosey now, so we're gonna finish here in a second. That just goes to show you though, when you're working on pumps, you gotta always have the 2 P's, patience and persistence, and some WD-40. All right, so now you're gonna unthread this and then put some Teflon tape on there, thread it into the new one, and do the reverse of what you just did. Hey, don't forget that's gonna be pressurized, so you might wanna drain the tank first. Hey, well, we just gonna go with it though, it's all right. All right, taped up and ready for a switch. All right, honestly, that's the hardest part. Once you got that, you literally just plop it back in, put your wires back in, slap it all together, turn it on, call it a day. Just kidding, we are gonna verify that everything else is working properly, but we'll get to that step. All right, got the pump wired back in. Don't forget to tighten up that lug, not lug nut, but tighten that up. And then get your main line coming back in, 1-1, put your ground, and you're good to go. All right, now this little lesson's about leverage. I was trying to like squat over here and get this thing back on, but for the love of God, it just would not go on. So I finally just had to plop down like a little kid, and it's raining, so my butt's all wet now. But as soon as I did, 1 second later, that went on. So, again, patience and persistence. All right, now, one thing you can do. All right, grab your handy dandy little pliers, grab the tip, and just roll it over. Make a little loop, and put your screw post through it, and put it in the ground. All right, got your wires plugged in, but the job is not done yet. We got to get this pressure switch set. There's a few things involved with that. You could go off of what the little lid says. Like this is a 30-50 switch. You see it right down there where it says on 30, off 50. All right, but if this system is running, and let's say there's a zone that when it runs, it only runs at, all right, maybe this system has a 30-50 switch, but you got a zone that's like spray heads or drip, and it runs at like 55 PSI, right? Well, if this is set to cut off at 50 PSI, then that means that when that zone is running, this switch is constantly going to be clicking on because it drops below 30, builds up to 50, and then water gets used, it drops down to 30, builds up to 50, drops down to 30, builds up to 50. Because there's a zone that's running at 55 instead of below 50. So after we cut this on, one thing we're gonna do is we're going to hold down this pressure switch like so that I can go look at that pressure gauge and see just how high does this pump build pressure. Because that's the other side of the coin. If this pump can only build pressure to 55 or 60 or 70 PSI, I don't ever want to have this switch set to cut off above that level or even within 5 pounds of that level, because then there's a chance for the pump to not be able to build up to that exact pressure for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden your pump's running 24/7. So all that to say, it's not just as simple as replacing a pressure switch. There are a few more steps involved, but we've got all of our wires labeled, or not labeled, but put in correctly, so we can cut this pump on. I'm going to turn this hose bib off so that I can ball valve off, so I can isolate everything to the pump and the well itself, because I want to first be sure that everything's holding pressure properly on that side. All right, so this pump's been running for a minute or so. It hasn't shut off, and either the pressure switch isn't working because it should cut off at 50 PSI, or this pressure gauge isn't giving me a proper reading because this is saying it's at almost 90 PSI. So something's not right. Let's figure that out. All right, we'll get the pressure gauge thing figured out in a second. Another thing you can do or need to do is check the air in your expansion tank. Rule of thumb is if that's a 30-50 switch, or if your cut-on pressure is 30 PSI, you want your tank pressure to be 3 to 5 pounds below that. So if that cut-on is at 30, then I want this pressure to be anywhere between 27 and 25 pounds. And we're sitting at roughly 25.5. So I might pump it up just a little bit. Put it at 26. But don't check the air in this tank and think that that correlates to why that pressure gauge was still reading at 26 or 30 or whatever PSI, okay? because whenever you have that pressure gauge on there and you open up this hose bib and you drain all the water out of the system, then that pressure gauge should read 0. So I'm gonna replace that pressure gauge and show you what I'm talking about. All right, so I got the new pressure gauge on there. You can see this pump is building to just a hair below 50 PSI. So that's probably why it's running continuously. All right, so I cut the switch off. You can see our gauge is reading pressure. Now I'm going to open up this hose bib. I'm going to drain that water out, and you'll see that gauge drop all the way to 0, because if the gauge is working like it's supposed to, then that's exactly what it'll do. Even though this tank still has, and I'll keep the video going just to show you, the tank still has 25, 26, whatever. Now it's 24 because I keep taking this thing on and off. 24 PSI, but that gauge is reading at 0 because now that gauge is working properly. So now we can continue to troubleshoot and get this pressure switch set correctly. All right, so I'm just going to lower the cutoff switch for this pressure switch so that it's basically set at 45 instead of 50, because I want to at least get this pump to shut off first, and then we'll do that manual engagement and see just how much pressure it can build. Although I think from what we've seen, it's sitting around that 50 PSI range is as much as it can build. So on this switch, you can see those words right there, turn nut number 1, and you see it labeled right there, nut number 1, which is this big one. So this diagram is showing you that pressure switch as if looking at it this way. So that big one is gonna be our number 1, and the other one is number 2. And you see it says turn the big one to raise the cut on and the cut off pressure. Turn number 2 clockwise or down to raise the cutoff pressure only. So I'm trying to lower the cutoff pressure. So what I'm going to do is raise up that number 2 bolt. Just a hair, just a couple quarter turns. But before you go touching your pressure switch, making adjustments, always be sure that your switch is turned off. Because again, otherwise you're gonna get fried. So power's off. Just gonna grab that nut, get a little turn, and a little turn. See what happens. Sometimes when it's having trouble building up that pressure, because right now it's struggling to even get to 50. Just gonna cut this on. Kind of help air out these lines a little bit. Right here at the valve box, we can also cut a zone on. Maybe, let's see what these look like. Sometimes you just gotta go ahead and open it up, let it work for it. Now let's cut this off. Boom, there we go. Alright. So looking to see, does that pressure gauge hold? Should be holding. If it's not, we got an issue either on the well side or the irrigation side. It looks like it's holding tight. Alright, so now that we got the pump to work appropriately. I'm gonna take that lid off. Now this time you gotta leave the power on, so you gotta be very careful with what you're touching and stuff. But you're gonna grab this plate right here. And you're just gonna push it down, like so. You're gonna hold it. And then you're gonna look at your pressure gauge. You're gonna give it a second and see just how high will this go. So it looks like it goes just barely above 50. All right, so this is a 30-50 switch. If we just put it on and walked away, then we would have been getting called back out to eventually replace this pump, and it would have been our fault because that pump would have just been running continuously and not shutting off. So if you got a diligent homeowner, they might have caught it in time and called you back and been like, hey, my pump won't shut off. But you as the technician should never walk away from a pump without verifying, number one, that it is turning off, and number two, that it's holding pressure properly. All right, so right now our pump is holding at about, what do y'all think, 46-ish PSI. I'm going to turn my ball valve off, open up the zone to run again. And this time I'm gonna slowly crack this ball valve so we can see at what point does that pump turn on. It should turn on around 30 PSI. All right, so now we've done a lot. We've replaced the pressure switch. We've verified that the air in the tank is at the appropriate pressure. We verified that this is in fact cutting on at 30 PSI. So air in the tank being around 26, 27 PSI is good to go. We have verified that our pressure gauge is holding tight and we're not losing any water anywhere. If we were, we would shut off our ball valve and see, are we still losing water or did the needle stop dropping? If the needle stops dropping, then you know you got a weeping valve somewhere. If the needle is still dropping with the ball valve turned off, you got a problem somewhere on your well side, whether it be a foot valve, check valve, packaging, leather, seals, all kind of craziness, depending on what you have, who knows. But in this scenario, by having our ball valve open, we can verify that both the well side and the irrigation side are good to go because we are holding pressure. All right, so final step. We're going to cut on every zone and we're gonna walk back here and see what is that pressure gauge reading at, because the last thing you wanna do is, like I was saying before, have a zone that runs somewhere between, you know, anything above 50 right now, or anything above our 46 cut off, because that's going to cause the pressure switch to build up to that pressure, cut off. As the zone runs, it's going to go back down, and it's going to cause this pump to do what we call cycling, where it's just constantly cutting on and off, cutting on and off, cutting on and off. And that's not good for the pump, that's not good for the pressure switch. Stuff like that is going to wear those components out faster. So that's why you got to do your due diligence. We're going to go cut on every zone, walk back here, verify our pressure reading, and from there, if we need to tweak the switch anymore, then we can do that. Hey, another thing to know, you need to test your voltage on the 600 volt, not the 200 volt. So when you test these outside terminals, so one to the out, one to the in, see it's at 249. If you've got this multimeter set at 200 instead of 600, then it's going to read open line instead of telling you what the voltage is. So you might look at this and be like, oh, okay, it's off. And then find out, oh, nope, it wasn't off. If you got it on that 600, then it can build up past. That's the whole thing. It's at 250 instead of 200 is the max that other one can do. Anyway, so power coming in, and then it goes over into the pump. Right now it's at 0 because those contacts aren't connected. But if I turn this on, off those inside. So it'll be reading 240 for the outside. $240 for the outside, and once the pump is running, it goes over, $240 to the inside. Those contacts are connected, and that's how that pressure switch works. And that zone 1 on right now. You'll see how it looks here in a second, but it's running around 20 PSI, which is less than 46, so that one will be good to go. When you're doing this, just come out and verify. Look at how that zone looks, see if it's fully pressurized or if it's still trying to pressurize, and then go check your pressure. All right, don't just turn the zone on and immediately go look at your pressure reading because it's still trying to pressurize that zone potentially. So just give it a minute or two and then walk over there and check it out, and you'll be good to go. All right, zone 2 has been running for a minute. It is also running at a little over 20 PSI, less than 46, so our pressure settings are gonna be good to go. Another thing that you can check while these zones are running, just turn this ball valve off a couple times, just to be sure, like, hey, can the pump build up to that pressure cutoff easily, or is it constantly like struggling just to get there? So this one is doing really good though. Cut it on, touch on around 30. It can bottom out and build that pressure back up. Pump seems to be working good. Cut that ball valve off. Alright, good. That's what we want so far. Still got one more zone to check though. Alright, the zone's been running a few minutes. It's still at the same PSI. It's not going above our cutoff, which as a reminder was about 46 PSI, give or take. So I'm good with that. We'll let that continue to run. And I think we are finally all done. That is how you replace a pressure switch start to finish.